I'm Elizabeth E. King. Welcome to Long Lost Friends.
And I'm Andrea Goyan. And today we are delighted to be talking to both Jason and Sunni Brock. Jason is an author, artist, editor, publisher, and filmmaker.
He is the CEO and co-founder with his wife Sunni of JaSunni Productions LLC, whose documentary films include Charles Beaumont, The Short Life of Twilight Zone's Magic Man, and many more.
He's also the author of Totems and Taboos, a compilation of his poetry and artwork. As an editor, along with the late William F. Nolan of The Bleeding Edge, Dark Barriers, Dark Frontiers, and more, and I kind of messed it up, and as an editor along with his friend. So I hope that makes sense.
Okay. And in addition to award wins and nominations, Brock's poetry, short stories, nonfiction articles, introductions, and essays have been widely published.
Sunni Brock is a writer, producer, and computer technologist. They are both longtime ethical vegetarians and animal rights enthusiasts.
Welcome, Jason and Sunni Brock.
Yes, welcome. And before we get started, we want to see your pets.
Well, one is stalking around here, so Sunni.
Let me.
While I grab this.
Let's see.
Oh, great.
It's always exciting to have new pets.
This.
Ooh.
Here's one here. This here that I have, this is Nova.
Yeah.
She's a new little girl, a little redfoot tortoise that we just adopted. We went on to rescueme.org, which I highly recommend, rescueme.org. And they have a reptile section. And she was found down in Oregon wandering around in the street, and someone could not find where she came from. And she looked like she had been maybe attacked by a coyote or a dog or something, but she's okay. And we just adopted her, and she's been with us a couple of weeks now, and she's doing great.
Where are they indigenous? Where are they from naturally, indigenous?
They're from South America.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Bring it closer to your face and she'll be more.
And there she is. Now she's not so blurry. There she is.
Do you know how old she is?
She's probably about 2 years old. We don't know for sure.
How big do they get?
Well, this one's, here's a subadult.
Oh.
His name is Freddie. Yeah,
Freddie?
He's wearing it. Yeah, he's wearing a diaper. See.
Hi, Freddie, you're wearing a diaper.
Yeah.
So they just run around your house?
They live mostly inside the house. They can live in the house or they can live, outside, but they don't hibernate. So we have to bring them in because it's too cold for this climate. So
that was my next question. Hibernate.
No, they have a hibernation reflex, but it's not something that's well practiced. It's not recommended that you hibernate.
How do they feel about their diapers?
They don't care.
They don't. I tried some on my pigeon. It was a success.
Freddie is a kind of a hellion. He runs around constantly trying to eat.
Yeah, we also have 2 other females that are bigger than Nova, and he likes to chase them. So
yeah. And we also have a really big male. Freddie is a juvenile. He's probably in his 20s. But we have a guy that's like in his 70s or 80s. And he's really big. If he comes through, I'll grab him and show him to you. His name's Spock.
Oh, great.
I had California desert tortoises for a while, a long time ago. They're so cool.
They are
How
cool.
long do they live, these guys, about?
Long time. Late 80s, 90s.
They could live over 100. Yeah.
Wow.
And we have some skinks and an iguana also. So there's a lot of reptile action here.
Very cool.
We can see them on the next show too.
Yeah, you can. By then the iguana will be more tame. She's pretty new. She's young and she's full of energy, and it takes her a long time to calm down.
Yeah.
Is she new?
Yeah, we've had her about a year and a half, I think.
Yeah, we adopted her from rescueme.org as well.
We did.
Yeah.
That's great.
So now that once she gets a little more acclimated to human contact, she'll be calm. I've had iguanas for many years. we lost one of ours 2 years ago, and her name was Liz, and I had her for over 23 years. So
Wow.
we went back a long ways.
Yeah.
Do they have free range in the house too?
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, once they're acclimated, they do. Like Liz
Yeah.
had total free range throughout the house because she was very well socialized. You can even train them, like potty train them. So, and so she was very well socialized. And then but that takes a while. You know, it takes a while of handling, and then you let them have more and more freedom in the house. And so she could do whatever she wanted in the house, but she mainly hung out in her, you know, preferred haunts, I guess.
Yeah, we have several what we call stations for reptiles around the house, which we set up lighting for them, like UV and a heater light, and also a pig blanket, which is a big heated platform that they use for farm animals. But we put these pig blankets down in different corners or sides of our house and put tile on top of them so they can go and sit on the pig blanket under their lights. And so we have several of those around the house, like one in our bedroom and one in our office. And so they're always hanging out with us wherever we are. They just wander in where we are and plop down. It's great.
That's so cool. Those are really lucky, really lucky critters to have found you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very lucky.
Yeah, we're very dedicated. I used to have about 40 different reptiles. That was a while back. But I had like a colony of what is known as prehensile tail skinks or monkey tail skinks. And they're like a little green skink, about 6 to 12 inches from snout to nose, snout to vent rather, which is the vent is their bottom, and that does not include the tail. Excuse me. And so I had them like in a colony of, I don't know, geez, maybe 10 or 11 of them. So, but they're very endangered now, so they're hard to get. We still have one who was born here. So, and they're one of the few reptiles that are viviparous, which means they have live birth, just like a mammal. And so that was exciting because he was born here, and his sister was born here, and all that kind of stuff. But she passed away. She was never very healthy. So, you know, but he's very robust. So we hope to get him some friends, but they're now like $1,000 each, and I would like to get a few of them. So that's a long-term goal. They used to be $60 a piece.
Wow.
And so they are now what's called CITES 2, which means they're endangered, and sometimes you have to have papers if you get them. So,
Right.
CITES
Can they be friends with ones that aren't?
no,
No.
they could barely be friends with each other.
Right.
So the tortoises that's not a problem. Iguanas are up and down. They like somebody, they can like them. But otherwise they're very territorial. Blue-tongued skinks, which we also have one, Max, they are extremely territorial. So they're like Klingons, you know, when they have, when they mate, they're like you know, the male is throwing the woman around, you know, and, you know, I guess she's all right with it, you know, so it's just, you know, you don't want to mix them though. And, unless they're litter mates, and then they can, because they again are a skink that has viviparous, so they have a whole litter at one time, like 6 or 7. And if they grow up together, they're usually fine. But it can be problematic if they're strangers. So I'm mindful of that. We would have to acclimate them and gradually introduce them. You know, if they fight, we'll have to keep them always separated and that kind of thing.
Oh,
they're also pretty.
Sorry.
Yeah.
they're also pretty sensitive to their environment. Like our monkey tail skinks, they're more tropical because they're from Madagascar, but our blue tongue skink, he's more of a desert guy because he's from Australia. So we have to keep them in different environments.
Oh,
Where the logo is not right in front of me.
So do you have like a jungle room in your house and a desert room in your house?
Well, they have terrariums, basically. They're huge enclosures that we've set up for them, but because they're lizards, I mean, they're like maybe this big and then their tails, but the other people that are huge, you know, they get free reign of the house, except Nova, because she's still too tiny. She could get lost, but she will eventually.
We actually have, they've gotten out of the house, the tortoises. And like I'll have the garage door open, and our garage is attached, so I would have the garage door because I was going in and out of the mudroom to try to work on something, and they would get out. And so our neighbor, who used to own a raccoon, he would find her and bring her Sherry, I'm talking about, and say, "I think somebody belongs to you." His name was Roy. And I said, "Yeah, there she is." And she was down the driveway eating the grass alongside the driveway. So that made me real nervous. So I got those tile things, that you can find keys and stuff like that with.
Yeah,
these trackers. And so I've attached those to their shelves in a non-harmful way, like with a little bit of tape, and they keep those on so that we can always find them should they get loose. But the house is pretty locked down and they can't get out of the yard. But I'm very paranoid because, I don't want them getting stolen. I don't want them getting hurt. And since they have free roam in the house, even though we're eagle-eyed and we do like several head counts a day, to make sure everybody's contained, we, accidents happen. One of ours got out and we had a sudden cold snap, but we didn't realize she was outside. She got outside for like 3 days. We couldn't find her.
Yeah.
And she was sequestered into a plant where she couldn't be seen. But this was before I got the trackers. So now we wouldn't have that problem.
Right.
Did she live?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We had to nurse her back to health.
She actually kind of went into the hibernation state.
She did.
And she didn't get frozen or anything. It was just very cold, like in the 40s.
Yeah.
And so, we nursed her back to health. That took a long time because they live a long time. And but she's more or less, 100%. And she might be 99%. She has a little bit of
bit of vision problem because her eyes got cold, and so she was blind for a few months.
Wow.
And because their metabolism is so slow, they take a long time to heal as well. They live a long time, but it takes a long time for them to heal, so you have to really watch them. But the nice thing about the tile trackers too is that they connect to your home devices, so when we're doing the head count we can go blah blah blah, ring my tortoise, and their little trackers will ring so you can find them. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you can see it on the phone where they are.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Bluetooth connected, and
yeah.
Excuse me, I have a little bit of allergies. Sorry.
I want one. Yeah. Do most of them wear diapers around the house?
Just the big guys.
Because I couldn't
one of the main big guy doesn't.
What?
He's the main big guy, Spot, doesn't. Because he's pretty. I don't know. I guess he's kind of house trained, sort of.
He's pretty house trained. He goes out to the sunroom if he has to do things, but the rest of them, they have no concept, so they have to wear diapers.
They do talk to each other though.
Yeah, they do. They use head movements.
They do that.
They use different head movements, and they even talk to us with their head movements. Like they have a word for food, which is like, it's like their head does like a mouse click, and then they have a word for I call it put it on the ground, but they'll be looking at you and have something, and they'll swipe their head down and touch the floor and then look back up at you.
Wow.
Hilarious.
And they're always, when they're talking to each other, like if this is their two heads, they're always doing like,
they're doing that. It's really weird.
Touching each other's nose.
Yeah, it's like watching bees do their little dance when they tell each other where the flowers are. We always wonder what they're saying to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah,
they're smart.
So you guys have the best pet stories so far.
Not only are they smart, I'll tell you how smart they are. Sherry, our oldest female, we have we call them the vending machines because we travel a lot, and so we put these tortoise pellets in them, and so we can remotely feed them, right? Well, she has figured out how to push the button, and so I'll be on a meeting and I'll hear the vending machine over and over again, and she's over there feeding herself. It's hilarious.
She learned it her own self. I mean, she saw me do it one time and then started doing it.
Wow. So how do you keep them full then if she's always over there?
Because they're bottomless pit.
I know. We just have to keep putting more in there.
Well, it's mainly for when we're gone. So now that she does it, now they all go over there and congregate, wait on her to vend.
Yeah, they do.
And,
she feeds everyone?
Yeah.
And they'll all, if she gets full, she'll walk away and they'll eat the rest of it.
Right.
That is cute. Yeah.
They're
I
ridiculous.
think you and Mercedes Lackey, because she has a lot of birds, and she actually trained her birds to poop on command.
Yeah, you can do that. I used to have some parrots, and you could do that kind of thing with them.
Really?
You know, and I've had a menagerie of animals.
Yeah.
I think everyone here has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've had dogs and, you know, more traditional animals, but
Yeah.
the parrots were a big commitment just because they go insane if you're not around them. And I was traveling a lot. I used to travel a whole lot for my old job. And so it got very time consuming to have to, and kind of worrisome, you know, because they're, you know, very neurotic and needy, I guess. You know, that's how I describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they need people there all the time. There are people there all the time.
Yeah, and reptiles, they are not neurotic. They are somewhat needy, but they like attention, you know, but they don't go bonkers if they don't have it.
That's because your tortoises have such long lives. They're like, well, eventually the people will return.
Yeah, I mean, how long are we really gone, you know, on their relative time scale, you know, we're probably gone like that long if it's a
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
You know, and they're like, oh yeah, they're already back. Look at that. They just
I
left.
know.
You know, but
Yeah, I imagine that they watch us and we look like hummingbirds zipping around to them.
mhm.
Probably they've only been gone a year. Gosh.
Well, there was one that lived in a room in South America that got forgotten in somebody's house, and they lived there for 30 years by themselves. And they were drinking water that was intruding into the house, whatever food they could get, scavenging. And they found it. They were going to demolish the house. They went through for a walkthrough, and they heard all this racket, and there's this tortoise in there. And they said, "Oh my God, that's the one we lost in like 1978 or whatever."
Wow. Wow.
You can read about it. You can find that online, but it was a redfoot, of course. And so they rescued him, you know, after 30 years.
God.
He probably did think that was a while. He probably thought, wow, they've been gone at least a week.
Yeah.
Seems longer than normal.
I
Yeah.
know.
Exactly. So among besides reptiles, which are really great and fascinating, we also wanted to talk to you about Bill Nolan and your long association and all the work you did with him, and maybe even a bit about like the history of sci-fi, since I know you know a lot about it.
Sunni, why don't you start a little bit with
Well,
that?
I wanted to talk a little bit about when we were talking about our reptiles, and Bill Nolan lived with us for the past couple of years, and he was very fond of our reptiles. And I just wanted to have a shout out to that. He loved them dearly. And
Also an ethical vegetarian.
yes, he was also an ethical vegetarian, had been a vegetarian for 20 years when we met him. And we met him in, I think, 2006. So he, you know, he had been a vegetarian for a very long time, and he loved animals very much. In fact, Jason and I and Bill wrote a story together about our iguana Liz and another iguana that we had adopted. And when she passed away, we wrote a story kind of called Where Iguanas Go. And that's in a book that was put out by William Wu, and it benefited animals in Southern California. So it was fun to do something together with him, you know.
And it's so lovely when you get to have, I think, you know, and benefit anthology. Sometimes that's really nice, because it's like, I can't necessarily give money, but I can let you have my story type of thing.
Right, exactly. And that was, you know, it also, you know, I think as a contributor to that, getting to meet other people that I didn't know were really into animals as well. Like Larry Niven was a contributor. We did a signing down at Dark Delicacies when the book came out in Los Angeles.
I live in Burbank. So
yeah, there you go. So
we used to live in Long Beach.
Yeah, we did. So getting to meet the other authors that we didn't know that were, you know, local to LA and were into this was very fun. And it was one of the other things that we can work together on with Bill. You know, we've worked together with him on a lot of things. Jason, the first thing that Jason and Bill did together was a Logan's Run comic. and they've got some other stuff that they've been working on.
Now, Bill Nolan wrote the Logan's Run the movie, right?
No, he wrote the novel.
The novel.
George Clayton Johnson wrote the novel.
Okay.
And so they wrote, well, that's a long story. Well, why don't you finish about how we met, Bill, and then we can get into Logan's Run.
Oh yeah. So we were working on our documentaries. We were working on one about Charles Beaumont, who was a writer for The Twilight Zone, and we had started by working on one about Forrest J. Ackerman, but in the process of discovery about Forey, we also learned that the same people had interacted with Charles Beaumont. So we started doing both interviews for both films at the same time, since there were so many people in common. And we were interviewing George Clayton Johnson, who was also a writer for The Twilight Zone. And he had mentioned that we should talk to Bill Nolan. And Jason said, "Oh my God, is that guy still alive?" And and George said, "Yes, he's up living in Bend, Oregon." And we had just moved back to the Portland area at that point. So we were like, oh, well, he's really close. So we made an appointment to go out there and interview him, and we did. And we just hit it off immediately. He was like, he was just like us, we were friends. And so we kept in touch with him. And as time went on, he would come visit us in Portland. We took him to Powell's, took him around. He was still driving at the time and still full of energy and, wearing us out, even though he was in his late 70s at that point. But yeah, we just became fast friends. And then when he decided he wanted to leave Bend because he wasn't happy there, he didn't like the weather, and he was alone. He had to choose between going to Arizona or moving to Vancouver, and he chose to come live near us. So, and there he did.
Great. Yeah. When I first met you, I think he was, if he wasn't living with you, you guys were really great friends.
Yeah.
Really nice, I think. I mean,
yeah, he was, well, we started doing them. Let's talk about the movies for a second, because he's tied into that. So we were living in Long Beach, and I said I wanted to do some things I'd done like some documentary type things as a teenager. And I said I was interested in doing some documentaries. And so I went and bought all the equipment, and we didn't know anybody in the industry at all. So we did cold letters to about 10 people. And a few of them called or wrote back. And the first one that did was, I think, John Landis, who did American Werewolf in London and Twilight Zone the movie and, Animal House and all that stuff, the thriller video. So Landis called me and said, so you're doing this documentary? And I said, yeah. And I said, I would like to interview you. And he says, who have you interviewed already? And I said, at that point, nobody. And I said, but I have a commitment from Ray Bradbury, who wrote me back and said that he'd be willing to talk for a few minutes about Charles Beaumont and maybe Ackerman too, Forrest J. Ackerman. And I said, okay. And so we were setting that up when Landis bit. And so he says, once you get some more people involved, then you contact me again and we'll do an interview. And I said, okay. So that happened. So we started doing the documentary and found out there was a lot of drama about another documentary. Okay. So our documentary initially was going to be about Charles Beaumont, and also another documentary about Forrest J. Ackerman, who founded cosplay more or less and was the first fan and all this, and he was the editor of Famous Monsters of Filmland. So we get involved in the Ackerman thing pretty heavy, start interviewing people. We're interviewing people because they both had people in common. And so we get the interview process rolling. Ackerman has an accident at the Worldcon, World Science Fiction Convention in Scotland. I can't remember the year, but you can look it up. He slipped in a bathtub and scalded himself. And so he was injured pretty bad and wound up staying in Scotland, I think, for a period of time, a couple of weeks, and then came back to the States and really knocked a lot out of him because he was an older man by then. And so we put that on the shelf, not knowing if he was going to be alive. I think we'd interviewed him by that point or not. And the reason we did that is because the one we were starting to roll with, Charles Beaumont, the Twilight Zone's Magic Man, we started that process, found out from Mark Scott Zachary there was another, and Roger Anchor and some other people involved in it. Anchor is Beaumont's official biographer, and Mark Scott Zachary is a Twilight Zone expert. So we found out there was a fellow named Clay Reed doing a documentary about the group, which is a confederated group of writers from the 50s. And it's kind of anchored by Charles Beaumont, Bill Nolan, and John Tomerlin, but also mainly around Beaumont, but had people who were adjuncts that I kind of envision as a nucleus of an atom, but people around them at the outer shell would be like Bradbury and Robert Bloch and people like that who are well established. And then inside of their core group, there are about 30 or so people. And that would be like Richard Matheson and George Clayton Johnson and O.C. Rich and Chad Oliver and, you know, Tomerlin, Nolan, Beaumont, Johnson, and like, you know, there was one lady there named Mari Wolf, who's a science fiction writer, Chris Neville. So there was this group. And so he was doing that mainly about them. And he had already interviewed Matheson and Nolan and these people. But he and I got in touch because I wanted to say, well, Mark Zachary said, well, there's no reason you can't still do a movie about Beaumont because there's lots of material here. And I said, well, I don't want to impinge on him. So I got in touch with Reed. We start coordinating. And then when Ackerman is injured, so we shifted to Ackerman. When Ackerman's injured, we shifted back to Beaumont, if that makes sense. And we got that movie. Really, we got a lot of interviews. And there was some competition between myself and Clay, just friendly, you know, to complete these things. And he would come up to visit me and us, and he would watch our footage, and we would see his footage, and he would explain what he's getting and what he had. And so, excuse me, it went on like that for a couple of years. We finally got everybody interviewed, Harlan Ellison and all those people, Roger Corman. And I didn't tell him. He kept asking me who I'd interviewed, and I didn't want to tell him because I was like, well, he's going to go skunk me and try to scoop and get this thing out faster. And so because he was in the industry, and he kept reminding me of that. And
we got Shatner. Like, he couldn't get Shatner.
Yeah, we got William Shatner. He couldn't get Shatner. So I was like, oh man, I don't know who. I can't figure out how I'm going to get this done. And behind the scenes, I was like, we got to fucking get this done. Sorry, I swore. You know, so so I was, and so Bill by then Bill was the last person we interviewed that of any. You know, like she said, I didn't even know he was alive, so I didn't think that to write him. And so, but George Clayton Johnson was the one who said that. He said, he's living up there in Bend, Oregon. God knows what he's doing up there. And I said, okay. I said, wow, that's pretty close to our house. Really, that's only like 3 hours away. So we went to Bend, Oregon, and interviewed Bill. And it was like, you know, instant click. And we just were fast friends from that point on. And he was going to move to Tucson, Arizona, and he'd already had skin cancer like 6 times. And I said, well, that's like the second worst place in the world you could literally move, because I actually found that statistic. The first worst place he could have moved was the outback of Australia. And I said, so if you've got skin cancer problems, probably you don't want to be moving to Tucson.
Right.
And he had 2 friends who lived there. And I'm not sure it would have worked out for him as well. And so I convinced him. I said, well, you know, we have great weather here. Why don't you think about moving up in our direction? And this is not like to live in our house. That was, and he said, well, I don't know. So he visited a couple times. We went back down to Bend, and then he wound up moving in an apartment near us. Yeah. And from then on, we were just kind of doing our things together, helping him out. But he was very spry, even into his mid-80s.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and his mind was always very clear and sharp, even towards at the end, you know. So that was, and he didn't have any other family. You know, he was estranged from his wife for a long period of time before I ever met him, like 10 years almost, or 5 years by that point. And so they didn't really. She was living with another man, you know, and he had bought her a mobile home and all this. Bill did. When their marriage more or less blew up, and he moved away from there because he moved away from California to get away from her because she was going cuckoo, and she was already living with this guy. You know, they were all 3 living in the same house, and they were a couple, and Bill was kind of the man on the outside, but he was paying for everything. So he just moved up there to Bend and had nobody, and except a friend, you know, and who was a collector. And so he needed more human contact, I think. And so we just fell in, and he decided to move up here, and we just did a whole lot of stuff together, a lot of books. He was in both movies. He's in Ackerman and Beaumont. And but to get back to the Beaumont story, what happened was, you know, so Bill was the last one I interviewed, and we got that in the can and kind of put it all together and got the movie done. And then we got invited, after I showed a little bit of it to the curator at the Egyptian Cinema in Los Angeles. We got invited to screen it there. And usually you have to pay for a theater. That's kind of how they do premieres. You pay for it and then you show them it. But they said, no, we want to show this and screen it. So they screened it with they screened it with Roger Corman's The Intruder, and which the movie features a lot about The Intruder, because The Intruder was a novel written by Charles Beaumont that Corman optioned. So he wanted it so bad, he put a second mortgage on his house to get it. And so he optioned the book, and then Beaumont adapted it because he was a writer for The Twilight Zone. And he adapted the story, which is about integration in the South in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, this is not a genre novel,
not a genre
or a
piece.
genre
Great
picture.
literary kind of thing.
This is a very serious drama,
Yeah,
and
it's
it was
based on a real story.
and it was
guy.
topical, and yeah,
it was in 1962 when they made it, so it was very topical.
Right. So, and they filmed it in Missouri, which is where Bill's from. He's from Kansas City, but they filmed it down in Sikeston, down in the Boot Hill, Missouri. And it was Shatner's first movie role. So Shatner played the lead.
Film. I think he done one little supporting thing.
And Beaumont himself plays the school principal, and Bill and George are in it. They play They play nasty townies that are, you know, against the integration and these Hicks and stuff. So it's very fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Interesting to watch Bill in that role, since, you know, he was so not that role.
Right. He is the total opposite. Right.
Yeah, exactly. He was a real terrible bigot, you know, in the movie, and like it's horrible. And George was too. And George, this is pre-Logan Drone, of course, where they wrote that. But but Bill, he was really pretty good. He did bit parts throughout his career. But so we got the movie done and premiered and everything, and under a slight duress, and then we moved on to Ackerman, because Ackerman by this point had recovered, and so we did some pickups with him, and we filmed a bunch of people that knew Corey as well, who were not in the first movie, and you know, like Greg Bear and Dan O'Bannon and people like that. And then we got that one done, and they invited us to screen it at the Aero, which is another historical theater owned by American Cinematheque down in Santa Monica. Excuse me. And so that went very well. And yeah, we had sold out crowds both times, and we're working on a third documentary right now. We've been working on for a long time, called Image, Reflection, Shadow, Artists of the Fantastic. And it's basically about this movement of art, loosely called fantastic realism. And the main name associated with fantastic realism would probably be Ernst Fuchs. And we interviewed him at the behest of Clive Barker, was the one who suggested Fuchs. Although I never got Barker in the movie. I wanted to, but I never did get a chance to do it. But he had suggested getting Fuchs in there, and I did. So we went to Europe for a month to interview a bunch of artists, and that would be H.R. Giger and Fuchs and Peter Griesch and some Victor Safunkin and like a whole bunch of people.
Now, you mentioned what kind of realism? Fantastic realism?
Fantastic realism.
And is that like magic realism?
Well, it's more like it's closely affiliated with surrealism, okay, but it's more of a school. There was a thing called the Vienna School of Fantastic Realism. There was a sub school of surrealism, and what it was it would take very realistic elements and fantasy and blend them together in an allegorical way using the old techniques of the Misha technique, which is mixing color on the canvas and to get using mainly oils to get this translucence and kind of luminosity. So we have 3 artists in there who actually were friends with Salvador Dali, and Dali would be more of a surrealist, but they then kind of split off from that, you know, after Dali's influence into fantastic realism. And so we interviewed Fuchs, and we interviewed H.R. Giger, and we interviewed Robert Venosa and his wife Martina Hoffman. Venosa and Giger and Fuchs have all passed away now, but Martina is still around. But yeah, those 3 guys, and I think Martina too, she was a little younger than him, knew Dali. So that was interesting to have that lineage and them talking about it.
Yeah.
But we had 60 hours of footage, and so it's been taking a long time to compress that to 2 hours of a narrative. And because it's not as cut and dried as a biography, it's about a topic versus a person.
And there's so many interesting tangents. You know, Giger is famous for his work on Alien, so you see his work in Alien. He's done a lot. He did some work for Jodorowsky's Dune, which never came out famously, but it's in there. He did a lot of album covers. And then, you know, as well, then we go back over to some of the other folks that we interviewed, and they actually, you know, knew the Dalai Lama and were very into spiritual things. And then we also interviewed Roger Dean, who did all those great album covers for Yes and Asia. So it's there's a lot of really fascinating tangents to go off on into this in this documentary.
You might have to make a like 2, huh?
Yeah, we might have to do
about it.
like
Yeah, we might,
because once you render all that stuff down, I mean, it's a lot of stuff to work with.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I can. I mean, cutting from 60 to 2 is, you know.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's very difficult, but I mean, I think it's rewarding. I mean, because not many people understand this whole thing about Misha technique, and you know, and all the different ways this fine arts are related in this way. So, and you know, so we have a good reputation now with these 2 that we've already done, and we're working on getting those on the streaming platforms right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Well, you've also done a lot of anthologies, though.
I have.
mean, do you find a similarity of working with that or not?
Well, anthologies are interesting, you know, because when you're doing films, you know, was the primary person interviewing the interviewees and interacting with them. So you learn all these things about things and from them. In anthologies, rather, you know, you work with a bunch of different writers trying to fit together into the loose theme. And so the first book that I published, that was an anthology, was a co-publication with Dark Discoveries, James Beach, and it was called the Bleeding Edge, Dark Barriers, Dark Frontiers. Now, Bill Nolan and I co-edited that book, and so we would have each story we had to agree on. And I said, well, why don't we have a deal where we can horse trade one that I like more than you do, and vice versa, if we stumble upon something like that. And he agreed. And so we went into that with that deal. And so we were very picky and choosy and really strict with what we wanted. And I think we got a very good book. It had a lot of honorable mentions from Ellen Datlow and her Year's Best thing. And I'm not really a proponent of these Year's Best things because personally, I feel that the most of the work is done by the original editor. Then for the Year's Best anthologists to come along and say, yeah, I like the best of these stories that have already been picked, it's kind of, that's an easy job, really, you know, because they can pick and choose what's already been suitable for publication. And the way the industry is structured, I don't know, it's once you learn the ins and outs of it, it's kind of like the politics and sausage thing, you know, it's not good to watch how it's done. And so oftentimes they have, you know, they know the names they want to get ahead of time, and they wait on them to write a story that's acceptable, and then they oftentimes kind of just pick that story because that's the name they're already going to put on the cover. And so it's not really a best of so much as that part is the marketing apparatus. You know, they already know the name. Oh, these are hot names. We're going to make sure we get one from them. So
they know the names they want to push. I mean, they a lot of times they have to have their cover with the names on the cover ready before they've even picked the stories, because of the timing of those, the way those come out. And so it ends up being, okay, now I have to fill this. And if they know a certain editors publish those people more often, they'll just ask that editor, oh, send me the one you think I should do for this person. And that's how it works, unfortunately. So yeah, but you know, it is what it is. The realities.
What it is, and that's not to say that it's, you know, I'm not saying it's a corrupt system or a bad system.
It just is what it is.
It just is what it is, and it's just part of how you have to move products to some degree. And so what they do is they leave extra space for people who are newer or unknown, you know. So, but they have to have a name to anchor it. You know, like in Bleeding Edge, the anchor name for our book was Ray Bradbury. You know,
It's a good anchor name.
it is a good anchor name. And these were unpublished Bradbury stories at the time. So we were first publication for them.
Yeah.
Do you have a Bradbury in this? I happen to have it here. Since I was in it too.
Dark Fantastic. Yeah, no, we don't have Bradbury in that. That book, that was me alone doing the editing on that one. And that was a very difficult book to do. I think there are like 50 writers in there. And I read literally hundreds and hundreds of stories from all over the place. And it was like exhausting to finish that. But I did get it done, you know, and it's 275,000 words. And it's a very large, you know, and variegated sort of thing. And the stories in that, I think, they're all original. All three of those anthologies are original stories. There's no reprints on them. And so I think it came out excellent. I love your piece. I love Misty's. You know, and I've gotten a lot of accolades. It was nominated for a Stoker Award, and it won out to what I feel is an inferior book, but I won't go into that. And so I did read it though, and so, you know, I'm very proud of it. And I worked with Bill on, you know, the Stokers. That's another thing. Awards and things I've come to understand don't really mean that much either. I mean, they don't add that much to your saleability. And it's mainly bragging rights, and that's fine if you're trying to get your name out there. But if you've been out in the field for a while, it is what it is. An award is just, it sits on the shelf. You know, I have some on my shelf, and it's good for your bio if people have never heard of you. But I think sometimes people make it like their life's ambition to like get an award or something, and it's like, well, you should make your life's ambition being your legacy, meaning how good is the work. And, you know, and the awards are fine if they come, but that doesn't mean that they are validating you. Because if you think of it, most writers who have ever lived never even lived in a time when they could be eligible for an award because they didn't exist. So does that mean Hemingway sucks if he had never won an award or anything? He did wind up winning some, but I mean, no. Charles Beaumont, a fine writer, won one award and never even got it because it got lost, I think, when they were shipping it to him. So
terrible.
You know, what is that? Does that mean, well, Charles Beaumont's terrible? You know, no. It just means that these things don't really matter. It's like having a degree. Most of the great minds throughout history weren't even educated in the higher education system, didn't have a degree. So how important really is that?
Yeah, and like a degree, you have to have a certain mindset and be chasing that degree or chasing that award, right? You have to go to the school and learn their thing and do it their way to get the degree. Same thing with the awards. You're chasing a market, whether that market is voters in that award pool, or you know, you're compromising your vision to do whatever it is that's going to get you something. And you know, I think Jason and I, and even Bill, we were more along the lines of, let's do what we think is interesting and create our own thing. And if people like it, they like it.
Yeah.
And I'm not faulting anyone, you know, or anything. I'm just saying that shouldn't be your end goal.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, you guys have been nominated and won a lot of awards. So I think you can criticize, whereas if you've never, you know, been anything, it's like, oh, sour milk. But it's obvious.
And you know, you have to apply for those awards. You know, it's not that they just come and find you.
Right.
You know, you have to apply. It's not like the Academy sees a bunch of movies and they go, I think we're going to put this one in the hopper. You
Right.
mostly in the genre, writing genre, you have to put your name in there, or the publisher does, and then they consider it, and then it
Yeah.
gets put up to a vote, usually by jury and or the membership.
And
So
in movies, the producers put a lot of the movies out. I mean, the Academy votes on the ones that are put out by the producers who put people up. So
Right.
it's similar.
Yeah.
I remember taking a class where I had a teacher that was saying at the time, it was an acting class, but they were talking about don't go for the award, because if that becomes your life goal, if you achieve it, you're left with nothing to do. You're empty.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of go, well, I did it. And now,
Right.
oh, now what?
I think some people
Yeah.
do get dispirited once they hit it and reach an award level status. They're like, well, what else is there
Yeah.
for me?
I-
You know, and it's like, well, there's a lot for you to do. I mean, if that was your motivator, though, it does remove your motivation, doesn't it? You know, they win the award, and it's like, okay, so I hit my goal.
Yeah.
Okay, it's like saying, well, I hit $1 million. I mean, now what do I want to do? Well, you could say, well, I want another million. Okay, that's one way of being, you know, the impetus being reestablished. Or you could say, I want to help humanity, so you donate some of it, or, you know, so it just depends on what you're motivated by. Me, I'm motivated by creativity and doing a quality, very well produced thing that is informative and interesting to people. And that's not going to appeal to the mass necessarily of folks, but it appeals to a lot of people who are like me. I know David Bowie had a quote one time where he says, not everything I do appeals to everyone, but I mean, if I like it, I figure someone else has to like it.
Yeah.
And I kind of go by that maxim, you know, myself.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, you know, I think the award that means the most to me, and I'm sure this will resonate with Jason as well, is the Rondo Hatton Award that we won for the Acker Monster Chronicles. And the reason is because that's voted on by everyone. It's a mass vote, and it was the Monster Kids, and that's who voted for our movie. And
that was our target audience.
That's
and
our target audience.
We did not put it into the hopper.
No, we didn't.
They found it. I
Somebody
promoted
else
it. They
nominated
watched
it.
it and they said, well, this should be
Yeah.
on the list. Then it was on the list. Then it won. And it was
Yeah.
all had nothing to do with me. I didn't promote it. I didn't do anything.
No.
I just said, oh, the Hattons are out. We're on the list. Vote for your conscience. You know, I didn't say vote for me. I said vote your conscience.
Yeah.
But we're on here, and if you liked our movie, we would appreciate it. That's the
great.
extent of any politicking I did. But I said also vote for all the other folks too. And if somebody's better than ours, you know, vote for them if you like it. And so we wound up winning, and I was pleased because that was exactly the audience we were going for.
Exactly.
That's great. That's a great message too. Like, just go for the creativity and your own sense of satisfaction
Yeah.
rather than the reward. So
Yeah.
if
I feel like
had
you
a
and I,
chance-
Eva, you and I were like nominated for push carts along with Eric Winyard recently, and I didn't put myself up for that. You know, the publisher did.
Right.
So that's gratifying when that happens. You know, for the Stokers, for example, I was nominated for 2 Stokers in the same year, and so I was asked one year to submit a work, and I've been asked in the past to submit works to the Stoker people, and I've submitted things that I've published in order to help the writers in the book. I mean, not just our book and sales, but also recognition for the writers who are in the book, because without the writers, I couldn't have done these anthologies, you know. And so even though some of the writers don't care for me at this point, you know, over something completely different, it's all about politics. Since they don't like me, I'm a liberal, but I don't fall in line with a lot of these kind of ridiculous orthodoxies that have taken hold of the progressive left, and I find it very regressive. But beyond that, you know, we should ostensibly agree on most of the things, but these people, they're very radical in their point of view and unreasonable, I feel. So they think I'm an apostate, you know, and so I'm like, well, but unfortunately, fortunately for me, I'm willing to work with anyone. I don't care really what they do as long as the work is good, you know, provided they're not like a literal Klansman or something. So, you know, if they're conservative, that's fine. You know, if it's not in their work and they happen to be a conservative person, I believe very definitely in removing the art from the individual. I definitely come down on the side you have to split them. You cannot just keep saying, oh, well, you know, so-and-so was a terrible human, so we can't read their works or look at their movies. I'm like, well, that's hogwash.
If we
Everyone is
only
a
looked
terrible-
at nice people's art or movies, we'd have, like, you know, really not much to look at.
Right.
That I agree with.
Everyone can be defined as a terrible human depending on how you define a terrible human. And so, you know, we're all human is what it comes down to. And I think, you know, that human element, if it comes out in your art, there's still something to be gleaned from that and something to be learned. It doesn't mean that you should reject it, right? And I might add, you know, yeah, some of these same folks that are really upset about certain artists are, you know, would have no problem hanging a John Wayne Gacy painting on their wall, for example. It seems
Probably
a bit
not.
hypocritical at times. So I just think, you know, let's leave it where it is, and let's appreciate art for what art's sake. And if it reveals something about character, then it reveals something about character, and we should appreciate and learn from that, because we're all susceptible to these character flaws, and that's the point of art.
I totally agree.
Yeah, that's a great point. So thank you so much for talking about all this. It's really fascinating. And I think, you know, you guys always give you have a good moral message that comes through. Like when you were saying everybody's a horrible person, I was like, well, that'd be kind of hard to say about you, Sunni. But I don't know anybody who'd say that about you. I know Jason likes to poke and start controversy, which I always love watching, because I was like watching people, you say something and people get like this so many times. It's kind of fun.
Jason,
I like people to think.
Yeah, Jason's very Socratic in his method. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's a way of putting it. Yeah.
So we always end these episodes with the best thing I learned this week. And we try and make it not personal, though I have some personal good stuff that happened this week in terms of sales. But my best thing, I had so many, but this is my favorite of everything I learned. When a woman's pregnant and she eats kale, the fetus in her womb grimaces.
I saw that on something. That's hilarious.
I just like, oh, this is my best thing this week for sure.
Yeah, that's good. Mine is very small, but it's big though. It's that California and 8 other states have banned the use of animals for testing for cosmetics. And I can thank Elizabeth for giving me that one. So that's good. Nubs says thank you for that. He was outside crying. I had to let him in. He was crying for like 20 minutes.
He's crying for cosmetics. He's like,
was.
Mom, put some mascara on me quick.
So
what did you learn?
Yeah, it's your turn.
Anything? Jason or Sunni, anything?
Yeah.
What did you learn, Sunni?
I learned that alligators get the best deal in floods, because they get to swim down streets and check things out that they've never seen before. They look totally happy. Everyone else is miserable, but the alligator looks totally thrilled.
That's funny.
There was a shark there too in one of them. I'm sure the shark was not quite so happy, because I don't know if he could get back out to the water.
Probably not.
Right.
Sounds horrible. What did I? So what did it say again? What did I learn?
Best thing.
Weird or
Yeah, you don't want a bad thing. It has to be a good thing you learned.
But it could be a weird thing. It doesn't have to be just good.
Oh yeah, weird. Definitely weird.
Weird.
Or good.
Or good. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think I post a lot on Facebook sometimes just to, I don't use it on the weekends if I can avoid it. And so I'll post something about, like this week I posted about, I'm very tired of the superhero trend in films. And what I learned is that I am not alone. That to me is a happy thing, because that means I hope that we will have more creativity happening. Although in streaming, you know, there's a lot of creative things happening, but in film itself, there's less creative things happening. And I hope that I'm a little bit of an instigator in making people think about why they like these things. so much, but probably I have nothing to do with it.
Well, I don't like superhero either, so I hope you do.
Hey, if people want to, they want to groove on that, that's fine. But the comic books basically are kind of fading away. It seems to me, in respect, compared to what they used to be like in the 80s, for example. And I don't know. It's just basically going to be the films that are carrying that mantle forward in the future, with the comics kind of as a run along, which is sad because the comics itself is an art form. And I've got nothing against that, but it gets formulaic and tired. I mean, just like anything that's, been around a long time,
Great. Well, thank you so much. And we look forward to talking again to you soon. I can talk, just not right now. And we also want to thank our producer, Maria Korloff, for putting this together, and our editor, Alex Korloff. Thank you guys so much.
We couldn't do it without them. And thank you, Jason and Sunni, so much. And if you like this video, please go on, push the little like button in the comments section, and be sure to sign up and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any future episodes. And if you would like to help support the publication, you can visit our Patreon page and support us so that we can produce more original content, more original stories. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you guys so much.
Glad to be here.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.